salad. Really nice one. I'm not sure what they call this, kind of like a garden fresh salad or something. I don't care much for the dressings that come with it a lot of times, so I'm going to put on my own. Thousand Island. I used to use Thousand Island all the time. Years ago, I liked French Thousand Island. Then I recently started liking Golden Italian, different ones like that. But I hadn't used Thousand Island in a long time until my buddy John and I went over his birthday last April of 2025. It was his 60th birthday, and the restaurant, they have their in-house homemade Thousand Island dressing, and it was so good. So it kind of made me want to go back to having Thousand Island again. So that's what I'm doing. So here we go. So I got a lovely salad, got my bubbly. Almost bought carrot cake. I decided no, too many calories. It's good, and I love it, but just too many calories. Wow. There's a lot of big chunks of chicken here. Oranges, cranberries, cashews, different types of nuts, strawberry. Did I say chicken? Yeah. Yeah, lots of stuff here. Lots of really good stuff. So here we go. So, Ray and Wendy. I did a video a while ago about my neighbor, Ray. This is a different Ray. Ray was an elderly gentleman who lived behind me in my first house I bought years ago, and he passed away. This Ray was married to Wendy. They're both gone now, but starting at the beginning, when my marriage ended in 2007, late 2007, early 2008, I was looking for a place to live. The housing market was very stagnant, wasn't moving at all, very sluggish. So I had to wait for my house to sell. So once my house sold, then I was able to move forward and find a place to rent and eventually buy. So anyways, so that took a while, but anyways, by July of 2008, my house sold. By August, I had looked at this particularity, or one in particular, this apartment. It was a one-bedroom apartment in a fourplex. An old fourplex that was built in '65, but it was well maintained. You know, 2 up and 2 down. And mine was on the ground floor around the back. So I looked at a lot of different ones, basement suites and different places like that. And I wasn't having much luck. I wanted something bright, preferably facing south, because I like lots of sunlight. I want something homey, hopefully close to work. When I found this place, it checked off all the boxes. It was perfect. Now, some of this may sound familiar because I made a video about my first apartment I rented after, being on my own, being married, and then, separating and being divorced and all that. First time on my own in years and years and years, well over 20 years, which is kind of weird. So anyways, so some of this may start out sounding a bit familiar. So I went and looked at this place. It was vacant. So I pulled up, walked around the back. I could look in the windows. It was everything I wanted. Facing south. Lots of windows. Bright. Couldn't be any closer to work then. It was unbelievable. Walking to work, it was just like a couple of minutes walking. Seriously. If I took the long way around, it was like, less than 5 minutes at the tops. If I took the short way, it was probably 2.5, 3 minutes. As a crow flies, it was just straight over there. It was like maybe an eighth of a mile. No, not even that. Probably, I'd measure in feet. Probably a few hundred feet. It wasn't that far away. So, anyways, when I found this place, I was stoked. So I was very, hey, how you doing? Very friendly right away. And I introduced myself, told him why I was there. I was looking for an apartment. He said, oh, that's great. And we shook hands. And I remember I shook hands a little too hard. He went, oh, because he had arthritis in his hands. I said, oh, I'm sorry about that. But anyway, so he said, this is my wife, Wendy. I look inside and I see this lady sitting there. And she's sitting in the living room. She waves like this. They were just wonderful people. And I thought, this is where I want to be. These people seemed so welcoming. It was a small building, like only 4 suites. In the short time I visited with Ray and Wendy, he told me the person upstairs was hardly ever home. He worked away a lot. And there's another fellow up on the other side upstairs above my apartment who worked, but he was quiet. He was a nice guy. His name was Ian. So anyways, that's fine. So that's good. When you're on your own after a divorce, you're feeling kind of lonely. And when I met these two, I felt like I wanted to live there. I know at my age this will seem weird, but this was like when I was 51 at the time. Well, actually, yeah, I was 51. So these people actually kind of seem like my grandparents. I know coming from me, it probably seems weird, but I mean, they were just so friendly, and I just kind of needed that at the moment, right? Some of that welcoming and that friendliness and that openness. And so anyway, I said goodbye and I went down to the agency, the rental agency, and I talked to them on the phone because they told me to go look at it or something like that, but they were closed at the time, so the next day I couldn't wait to get down there. And I think I even sent them an email and I phone left a message, told them I really wanted it, so I went down there. Told them I really wanted it. I said, okay, well, need some references. No problem, went to work. Got some references from 2 of the higher ups that work there. No problem. Went back, gave them the references, and they were kind of poker faced. They weren't letting me know whether I got it or not. And I would eventually find out within a day or 2 that I got it. And I was stoked. Another thing, the rent was only $605 a month. Even back then, that was cheap. Your average one bedroom back then went for about $800 or more. If you got one for $700, it was probably a dive. And this one was only $6. It's like I won the lottery. It was everything I wanted at a super affordable price. So this I got possession. August 15th, they gave me the keys. So you move in the 14th they want because it's vacant. So I did. Moved in August heat wave. The day I'm moving in, my son's helping me. Now Ray and Wendy were elderly. Ray was born in 1922. Wendy was born in 1924. 26. I think she was born in 26. Anyways, she was just a couple years younger. Yeah, I think she was 1926. I had those dates written down because they'd give me some contact information in case something happened, this kind of thing. Now they had a lady named Sylvia who was kind of their guardian. She was at my age, at that time about my age. And she'd been a good friend of them for years and years. She was actually a friend of their daughter, a childhood friend of their daughter who had been killed, but I'll get back into that later. And so she was kind of like a member of the family, and they totally trusted her and loved her, and she looked out for them. So she'd give me some of their contact information in case I had to contact her, in case something happened to them, or whatever. So anyways, I mean, that would come later, but that's how I knew their birth dates. So I'm moving in, and I got the couch out in the hallway there, trying to get it in. And there's me and my son. We're kind of going back and forth. I'm pulling, he's pushing. not stand up and end. And so we stood up and kind of got in there. So my son and I are both on the inside. Next thing I know, Ray comes over. He's pushing on all this. He's just putting us all into it, right? And for somebody to say she was very spry. So we got the couch in there, and that was great. Helped me move in. So Ray still drove. Scary as that is, he still drove. He had an old Volvo. It was probably something from the 70s, an old green Volvo. Dark forest green type thing. And they still drove, him and Wendy. Wendy didn't drive, she rode, he drove. But not long after I moved in, I saw him outside. I saw somebody running outside my window. It kind of caught my attention because when you see somebody running, it kind of gets your attention, right? And here was Ray. I mean, the man was like, 80-something, Well, he was born in 22, and this is 2000. He was 86 at the time. And he's sprinting, right? So funny. Anyways, one time he'd come over, and I had this back porch where my sliding door looked out over, which is what I was looking at when I saw him run by. And it was very, very up high, kind of steep. It was never ever finished properly. And he was there one time standing on it, and I went inside to get something. I came back out, and he was on the ground just getting up. He had stepped off and fallen. The ones like his patio where he lived, there was only a drop of a few inches, but this one was like that. And he wasn't used to that. He just stepped down and away he went, right? But got right back up. It was amazing, so surprised it didn't bust a hip or something. So they were lovely people. They used to get Meals on Wheels all the time. And they would always get Meals on Wheels, one for each of them, but they would always split one. Instead of eating one each, so they'd split one because they didn't have big appetites, and they would put the rest in their freezer. So they asked me if I wanted them. I was kind of reluctant because I thought, wow, Meals on Wheels, they've had them in their freezer for a while. I just said sure. I didn't really have the heart to say no, so I took them. So one day I took one out, looked at it, mic'd it up. Man, it was really good. It was great. I ended up eating all of them. They had like chicken and lasagna. Pretty good. So anyway, one day they asked me if I wanted a toaster oven. I never had a toaster oven, but they wanted to get rid of it, so I said, sure, okay, I'll take it. So they gave it to me. Now I had that toaster oven for months before I decided to use it. Never had a toaster oven before. Never really understood how useful they are. So I tried it. After that, I used that thing constantly. I still have it sitting right over here. I use it all the time. It's an old timer, but I like the fact that you just turn it on and it's working. It's going. Linda bought one a few years ago. You gotta push this button, then you gotta push that button, then you gotta push that, and then if the timer's not set right, it shuts off after whatever. It's crazy. For the longest time, I had to dig the manual out just to work it every time. So, anyways, Ray and Wendy never had a kitchen table. They had a small freezer in there. They ate in the living room on TV trays. They each had their own chairs and their comfy chairs with a TV tray. That's where they ate all their meals, was in the living room. was just, young. And they lived back in Ontario. And one night they were driving home, and they got into a car accident, and all three of them were killed. And I couldn't believe when I heard that, because here was Ray and Wendy, their only child, their daughter, pride and joy. They just loved her so much. Who wouldn't? It's your child, right? And their grandchild and the husband, all three of them were killed just like that in an instant. And that was all they had. I just couldn't believe it. I thought that's terrible. One thing I noticed about Ray and Wendy, they were a couple of real lovebirds. These two loved each other very much, you could tell. They needed each other. And of course, with the loss of their daughter, each other was really all they had. And I think that's kind of why they sort of clung to Sylvia, because Sylvia was their daughter's friend for years, like a childhood friend. Sylvia was executor of their estate and that sort of thing, and guardian medical. She was their medical contact and everything else. She had all their medical information, and she drove them to a lot of appointments and really looked after them. Wasn't taking advantage of them, nothing like that. She was really looking after them. They were quite fortunate that way. So, Wendy had been a nurse for years. Ray had worked, he had learned, he was in the Navy, and when he was in the Navy, he learned communications about wireless radio and this kind of thing. And so he got into, that's what he did, he got into the radios and appliances and stuff like that. Had his own business there for many, many years, dealing with all kinds of different appliances like radios, TVs, and that sort of thing. And I guess he had his own shop and his own service department, whatever. Made a good solid living doing that. But it's interesting hearing him talk about wireless radio. I mean, wireless was a term that we were familiar with nowadays, but hearing him talk about it back then was kind of different, So anyways, these two lovebirds were inseparable. I remember they needed a ride down to the doctor, and I can't remember why they weren't going to drive. I think this is getting to the point where Ray was starting to, I think he had to give up his license, or he was thinking about it or something, but I gave them a ride just over to the hospital, which was a stone's throw away, for an appointment. Now, this was just starting in the fall, because I was going back to school. I was taking the CARE course. It was a very busy course, very, very busy. Lots of essays. I had homework every night, hours of homework. And I didn't have a lot of time for anything else. Plus, I tried to have a social life and everything else, but didn't have a lot of time for anything else. And so for them to ask me to drive them to the appointment at the hospital, I didn't mind, but we left at about, I think it was maybe around 4 or so. And we waited and waited and waited and waited. It's like, I know it wasn't an appointment. He wanted to go with the emergency. He wanted to take his wife to the emergency. That's what it was. I can't remember why. Why you get there and you wait and wait. You wait and you wait. Came out, took her blood pressure, went away. Came back, they come into this room, so we all go in this room, take a blood test, go back. Finally, they check her out. And I can't remember what the ailment was, but she appeared to be fine. So I took her back home, but this was hours and hours of time that I just couldn't really afford. I'd spent so many hours when I had all this homework and crap to do. And so, that really turned out to be kind of nothing. I mean, it was just one of those things you probably could have made a doctor's appointment rather than take her to the emergency, you know. So, anyways, this one day, I get up and I'm going to work, and I see this early in the morning. It's in the fall now, and I'm not going to work. Pardon me. I'm going to school, and it's in the fall. The days are short. It's dark in the morning, and I see all these lights flashing. I go, then there's an ambulance there in front of Ray's place, and Wendy's going to the hospital. Now at this point I noticed that she was certainly not as mobile as Ray. She could walk minimally with a walker. She needed help, or you go to the hospital, you get a wheelchair, whatever. But she was not as mobile as Ray. Ray was just, like I said, you run and strut around, but she was really starting to slow down a lot. And it was getting to be more and more like that all the time. So anyways, she ends up going to the hospital because she just wasn't feeling good or something. So Ray was beside himself. So he wanted to know if he could go along. They said, well, no, you can come up and visit later. So later that day, I took him up there and we visited. So he was very worried about Wendy. He was quite lonely, so he said, oh, you want to come over for dinner tonight? I said, sure. So we had some of his Meals on Wheels. Sat there in TV trays, watched TV, ate the Meals on Wheels. He was very happy to have some company and someone to talk to. And, he was very concerned about Wendy. So, like I said, at this point, I'm not even sure how much he was driving anymore, because when I first met him, he was a little bit, but I don't think he was comfortable driving that much. So I said, I'm in school tomorrow, but I can take you up to the hospital if you want to see Wendy. He said, okay, that's great. So the next day I did. And that's the greatest place again. And this went on now for quite a while. For at least a week where I was having supper at his house every night. And I was kind of enjoying it because we got to talk, get to know each other. I knew a lot about him, or got to know a lot about him. And I could see that he really enjoyed the company. So this one night we're there, and he wanted to make a salad. And I remember I looked at his fridge at one point and I saw all these eggs in there. And some of the eggs had the letter B. And I said, why do you have a letter B on? They said, well, it's for boiled. So he had his raw eggs and his boiled eggs. So anyways, he wanted to make a salad to go with our meal. So I'm sitting in the living room and I can see him in there and he's making the salad. And he's, peeling an egg. He's going to put an egg on there and he's, putting the salad and all the stuff on there with his bare hands. He said, yeah, I haven't been feeling good today. He said, I've had the runs all day. And I thought, oh, I hope you're washing your hands, my friend. He's sitting there making my salad with his bare hands and he's talking about having the runs all day. And I think, oh, good Lord. So anyways, I just, I never got sick or nothing like that. Praise the Lord, but it just kind of grossed me out. But anyways, so he was really missing Wendy. So the next day, I'm going to work, and it's just like, deja vu. Walk outside, and the lights are flashing. There's an ambulance there, and Ray's going to the hospital. And I talked to the ambulance attendant briefly. Said, yeah, we're just taking Mr. I won't say his last name, but we're taking him to the hospital. I said, okay. So I said, is he okay? And she said, yeah, I think so. He was, he was lucid and he was talking and everything, but we'll just take him to the emergency and get him checked out. Apparently called and said he was having dizzy spells and chest pains or something. So right after school the next day, I walk up there. I just go right to the hospital. I walk in and say, Ray, how are you? And he was sitting up. He looked great, He said, well, I wasn't feeling very good, but so that's why I called an ambulance. Well, it didn't take long to get it out of him. And I phoned up Sylvia. No, sorry, Sylvia had phoned me. And we talked on the phone quite a bit. We'd only meet once, but we talked on the phone a few times. And we both came to the conclusion that Ray had phoned the ambulance because he had missed Wendy so much that he wanted to go to the hospital to be there with her. And I think he thought they'd be in the same room or something. Well, they weren't even on the same floor. So they had to discharge him because they couldn't find anything wrong with him. So he came back home. Eventually Wendy came home. And things are going pretty good. Next thing you know, it's probably around, I guess maybe October or so by now, November. And Wendy ends up going to the hospital again. Her mobility was really failing. She needed a lot more care. And, it was just getting to the point where, she needed help being toileted, and Ray just couldn't do all that, And they had home support coming in, but it was just getting to the point where it was a lot. So anyway, she ended up going to the hospital. I can't remember why again. She went to the hospital because, could have been her medication. She just wasn't feeling good or whatever. And so she goes to the hospital. And lo and behold, a couple days later, Ray does the same thing. Calls an ambulance for himself because he wanted to go up and see Wendy. I think they were on to him because they checked him out and discharged him, I think the next day. So at this point, now we're getting close to, like I said, around November. And Ray was doing pretty good, but Wendy was going downhill. Mainly physically, she was just getting to be more and more complex care, And so Sylvia phoned me up one day and said, she wants to go talk to this nursing home. The lady's name is Lydia. She's the director of care at the nursing home. And she said, could you take Ray up there? Because Wendy was now out of the hospital. And she said, Wendy really needs to go into a nursing home. She says, I can give Wendy a ride up there. I'm going to take her up there. Then could you bring Ray along? I can't remember why she couldn't take them both, but something to do with her car or something. So I said, sure, I'll give Ray a ride up there. So I rode up there and I met Sylvie for the first and only time. Lovely woman. About my age. A little bit older. At that time I was 51, she was probably 55, thereabouts. So, Wendy was up there in a wheelchair, looking very tired. Ray was very chipper, but, very worried about her. So Lydia said, Ray, I think it's time. Wendy needs to go to a nursing home. And Ray just looked devastated. He says, well, can we both come in here? And she says, well, I think so. And suddenly his whole face changed. He was like totally gung-ho. So they found a double room for the both of them, which was just fantastic. So they were going to both go to the nursing home, which was great. It wasn't just Wendy going, it was Ray was going to go as well. I remember he just thought, this is the best thing. He said, no, they can be together. They'll be in a nursing home. And he had no reservations at all. I mean, my mom, you would never get her in a nursing home. She would be screaming and clawing, she would not go quietly or easily. Wendy really knew she had no choice. And Ray he was willing to go. If Wendy was going, he was going. So they put him in a nursing home. It was a very old building. And they had a room kind of on the main floor, but at the back of the building kind of, and there was only one small window. It was very dungeonous. But it was one of the few rooms they had that was a double room with two beds. And it was really a depressing room. But they had the same furniture in there. They had their pictures of their daughter and various things. And they had a picture of me that I'd given them. And Ray always wanted to give me stuff. I remember he gave me a coat. He met Colin when we moved in, because Colin helped me move, and he really liked my son Colin. And he always wanted to give him stuff, so he gave Colin this coat, but it was kind of a winter type coat. And Colin said, well, I'm not really sure how practical it is for me, So I kept it. And then Ray had asked me when he was moving if I wanted these cabinets. He had these 3 cabinets for sale. He says, I'll sell them for $70 each. I said, sure. So I took all 3 cabinets for $210. Bought them off. And we just turned them sideways, pushed them across the hall into my condo and into my unit. I remember I was pulling, he was on the other end pushing, It was hilarious. So he was getting rid of some of the stuff before he moved into the nursing home. But I still have that coat. If you look at the picture I did recently, where there's a cutout, I made a Bob Ross video where I'm standing there. There's a cutout of Bob Ross. It's a green coat. I'm wearing that coat that he gave me. So anyway, he gave me that. I still have it. I really like it. But it's a fall winter type coat. So they were slowly getting rid of some of the stuff. They didn't have a lot of stuff. Mostly personal stuff, pictures and books and photo albums and their TV trays, that minimal furniture, So anyways, they moved into the nursing home. And the apartment would eventually be vacant, and my sister would move into that one the next January. This was in 2008. They moved out. She'd move in January 2009. So anyways, I was really busy with school, so after they'd moved in, I'd come to visit them a couple times, and then I was so busy with school because we're doing this transition where we're going from our classroom to our practical section, and that was a whole shift right there, completely different. A lot of exams coming up, so for a few weeks I hadn't seen Ray and Wendy, and I kind of let it slide a little bit because I was so busy with school. And so anyways, when we started doing our practicum, and I was working really hard in school, I was doing pretty well. I was happy to get away from the classroom because there was so many essays. So we're getting into the practical. We actually go to different nursing homes and places like that, and you work. So the first place we went was just over here, and I worked there for a while. Then we had Christmas break, then we went back, and then that was it. So that January, we went to the facility where Ray and Wendy were living, and I walked in and I saw them sitting there. I was kind of scared that the dining room, kind of looking for them. They were just sitting right there at a little table, just the 2 of them. I probably hadn't seen them in 6 weeks at that point. And I went in there and I saw them and we were talking. I said, I'll be seeing a lot of you because I'm taking a course, so they were just thrilled to see me. So we reconnected, so that was really nice that we'd reconnected. So anyway, so I stayed in their lives. Eventually I finished school in February. Went back to working. And continued to visit them. It was weird them not being in my building anymore. And it's funny, it's just a short time they're there. From August to about November. When I think back, it seemed like they were there for years, you know. But it was only just a matter of a few months. So anyways, it was nice to go visit them, but it was kind of depressing because that nursing home they're in, their room was really dull. One small window, really dull. This place was built well over 100 years ago. It was the original hospital. Then it was a college. Now it was a nursing home. And I always said you could film like a Jack Nicholson movie there, like The Shining or something weird, right? Because they had like these sort of dungeness rooms down in the basement. My foot's falling asleep here. And it was just kind of weird, right? So, I'd go to visit them. And, you know, Wendy at this point was always in bed. She was always in bed. Ray was much more mobile. He could still go out for walks. And I would take him out and we would go out. Wendy was not able to go out anymore. I think when they moved in, it took them out a couple times. But by this point, by the time I was finished the course and everything, and we were into 2010, she was mostly in bed a lot more. Or she'd be sitting in a wheelchair. But she very rarely had an outing, unless she was on the bus, like the nursing home bus where they had care aides and nurses and everything going along with them to help lift. They had like a special lift on the bus to lift them in. I couldn't get her into my car or nothing. But Ray and I would still go out. We don't do a few restaurants once in a while. We'd just go for a drive. I noticed that he was starting to slow down a bit himself. I remember driving by the old apartment, and as we saw to my apartment, he came in, and he met my sister who was living in his old place, and that sort of thing. And he actually met my mom too, because they were both over there one time. But so anyway, so this went on with, I just visited them and nothing ever really changed. And by 2012, Wendy was full ridden in bed. She had dementia because she was being, she had to be fed. She didn't recognize me anymore. You know, sort of mumbled a lot, and sort of flailed her hands around, and she was definitely changing. I took a picture of them. Okay, so Wendy passed away in 2012, and I took a picture of Wendy just before, it was maybe a couple months before she passed away, where she was still fairly coherent. And she actually smiled for the camera. I said, okay, come on, sweetheart, let me get your picture. So I got a picture of her and Ray, took their picture. And it was a pretty good picture. And so anyways, she passed away in 2012. I can't remember what month, but I know it was 2012. And Ray, of course, was so lonely. To make it worse, he was no longer allowed to be in that room because it was a double room. They had to send him to a different room. And if I thought the first one was there's this man sitting here on the edge of his bed in the corner, of this depressing room, with half a glass of apple juice on his nightstand, and just sad. We sat there and talked, and I could tell he was getting to be hard of hearing. He always wore hearing aids the whole time. He knew he always had hearing aids. They have those big ones behind your ear. But it was getting harder and harder for him to hear. And I remember this one day, I hadn't seen him in a while, because I'd been on vacation, this kind of stuff. So I went to see him. It was in the summer. It was really very warm out. And I went up to the nursing station, and I said, I'm here to see Ray. And they said, oh, he's sitting right there. I turned around. He was sitting right there. And I sat down and talked to him. He kind of looked at me like bewildered, like, who are you? And I said, how you doing? He said, pardon, or what's up? I could tell he just couldn't hear me at all. So I motioned for the nurse. I said, his hearing aids work. And she came over and she looked at him. She said, oh yeah, they're good. He couldn't hear a word I was saying hardly. And then when he was talking nonsense, like he was saying, that person's a spy, and that person over there is a spy. He was totally paranoid. Not making any sense at all. None. And so anyway, I believe that was the last time I saw him. And I walked away thinking, wow, he's really, really slipped just the last little while. He had really gone down, His hearing had completely changed. He was paranoid. He was talking like nonsense, which he never did before. He's always so sharp and lucid, made sense. And here he was just, going out, kind of the same way Wendy was. And so anyways, it wasn't long after that. And Sylvia phoned me and said that he had passed away. And so Ray and Wendy, she passed in 2012, he passed in 2014. Yeah, I remember she passed away, I think it was in the fall of 2012. For some reason, I think I remember that. It was in the fall. And he passed away, I think it was just the summer of 2014. I remember it was like really hot the last time I saw him. It was just shortly after that. So it just lived less than 2 years. But I thought those 2 years must have been agonizing for him, just living there all by himself, and I'd come to visit, Sylvia come to visit. I guess he probably had, some visitors, I'm not sure who, but he got to the point where I could no longer take him out either, because, he didn't even really want to go out. My mom was kind of getting that way. She used to love just going out for a drive or having her. No, she doesn't even really want to go out because it's just so tiring. And just, if she walks in the driveway, she needs to lay down and have a snooze, right? Well, Ray was kind of like that. He was just tired all the time, and so in 2012, I guess he was. He was born in 2012, so I guess he was 90 when he died. But the story of Ray and Wendy. A real tragedy when you consider their daughter and all that. But they were such a lovely couple. Like I said, the last picture I took of them was just not long before Wendy passed away. And they were still in the room. They're still very happy. Ray was still Ray, But then, her passing away really accelerated his going downhill too, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, everything else. And of course, physically. But that was that, so a lovely couple. I'll never forget them. I'll never forget their warmth when I needed it most, when I moved into that apartment. And I was feeling very lonely. Renting an apartment for the first time in, good Lord, 27 years, here I was on my own for the first time in 27 years. It was scary, So here I was renting an apartment. love story, a real love story. So anyways, that's it, my friends. That's my story of Ray and Wendy. I hope you like my epic story. Shoutouts. Once again, birthday shoutouts. If you want your shoutout on or around your birthday, you need to give me at least 2 weeks notice. The more the better, okay? Otherwise, I have to do it just when I can, okay? Because my videos are always recorded usually about 2 weeks in advance. Okay? So in the meantime, thank you for tuning in. Look after yourselves, look after each other. Stay amazing out there in the land of awesome, and we'll see you next time, okay?